Okay, welcome back to State of Morris County 2012 and for our discussion on education. And this morning we're privileged to be able to look at the state of education, the quality of education in Morris County with our panelists. And I'm just going to take the easy way here and ask you all to introduce yourselves and tell us what you do. And Randall, we want to start with you.
Yes. I'm Randall Westbrook, and I am a faculty member at Fairleigh Dickinson University in the San Martino School of Education.
Hi, Eileen Jankunis. I'm the Executive Director of the Head Start Community Program of Morris County.
Scott Pepper, Superintendent of the Hanover Township Public Schools.
And Scott, I'm going to turn to you first of all. You have a school that's a district that's highly rated. It's an outstanding performing district. What do you think it takes to make a good school?
Well, that's a great question, and you know, I'll liken it to I guess a realtor who, when you ask the question, you know, what are you looking for when you're purchasing a piece of property, they'll tell you the three most important things are location, location, location. And from my perspective, it really comes down to people, people, people. And people meaning having the best teachers that you can possibly have, working with the children, and that's really the primary focus and where our efforts should be.
And Eileen, you're in a situation where some people might be surprised to think that there's a Head Start program that's active in a county as affluent as Morris County. What do you find about the need for Head Start in Morris County?
The need is greatly increasing over the years. In 2006, 4% of Morris County children were living in poverty, and by 2010 it was up to 6%, which translates for children from birth through 5 years old to 2,000 children in Morris County living in poverty. And poverty is defined by the federal government as about $23,000 for a family of 4. So these are children who are living in really tough situations.
And Randall, from your perspective as an education professional and professor, we see these disparities in every county in New Jersey, the disparities between a wealthy district and a less affluent district. Historically, New Jersey has funded education with property tax, which has been, created the Abbott districts, the history of education, which we won't get into here today, unfortunately. But from your perspective, how are we doing in New Jersey in terms of really making education a priority and giving us the funding that's necessary?
Well, there are initiatives at the state level from the higher education perspective down. New Jersey kind of is a mixed bag, if you will, because it distinguishes itself as having 4 of the most affluent counties in the country, but also has Abbott districts, and it still remains one of the most socially, ethnically segregated states in the Union historically for education. So when you have these two disparities, this dichotomy in terms of wealth and poverty, in terms of ethnic diversity in the midst of ethnic separation, you tend to have to address both sides of the issue. That's why in a county that's affluent as Morris County, you're going to have pockets of poverty, and those pockets of poverty could have a deleterious effect on the entire education, even within a county that's affluent, that has many very, very successful school districts.
And Scott, your students, your K-8 district, so you feed into a district high school, or?
Whippany Park High School, yes.
And is that a town, or is that several towns?
All of my children go to Whippany Park High School. Whippany Park High School is part of a regional high school district with Hanover Park High School. So the two high schools together form a regional partnership with a separate Board of Education.
Just the two towns, Whippany?
Just the two. Well, the towns are Florham Park, East Hanover, and Whippany, Hanover Township, which is Whippany and Cedar Knolls. Those 4 towns send children to 2 high schools. All of the children in Hanover Township, where I'm superintendent, attend Whippany Park High School. All the children from Florham Park and East Hanover attend Hanover Park High School.
So I'm sure that even in an affluent district, such as the one you're in, there are always financial pressures. How do you deal with the financial pressures that you've got, that you're faced by your residents, your taxpayers, and the increasing need to drive costs down in education?
Well, that's a great question, and there's no easy solutions, as you probably know. We can look back to just a couple of years ago when the state entered a pretty serious economic crisis. state aid to school districts throughout the state were reduced significantly, and Hanover was not immune to that reduction, and we had to make some difficult choices. So we're in the process of transitioning to an effort to, as much as possible, raise funds outside of looking to the taxpayers, because we understand the financial burden that's put especially on the suburban taxpayers who primarily fund most of their educational programs. So in Hanover, for example, there's a couple of initiatives that we're engaged in. As most people know, we have 4 school buildings that we have to maintain, for example. And we recently entered into an energy savings improvement plan with the Honeywell Corporation. And we're looking at having $2.9 million in upgrades to our infrastructure. New boilers, new heating and ventilation systems, new mechanical controls, new lighting systems. All of these improvements will be energy savings. So the money that we're currently spending on energy will be reduced, and we'll use that money to then pay for the improvements. And the true benefit of that particular program is it has no financial impact on the taxpayers, because we're not asking the taxpayers for any additional funds. It's funded through the money that we're currently spending on energy savings. So that's one of the creative ways that we're looking at.
So how are you getting the money up front
off.
to change the system?
Well, the money is bonded or through a lease purchase arrangement, and it's set aside in an account, and the monies are paid once the improvements are made, and then our energy costs will be reduced, so we pay off the
Hopefully
bond.
they'll balance out.
Yeah, well, it has to be, you know, Honeywell comes in and they do an energy audit. They make a recommendation in terms of improvements that will see these energy savings, and then that has to be independently verified by a third party. And once you have those verified costs that you will indeed see those energy reductions, then you know you have a project that's good to go. It has to pay for itself, the energy improvements, over between 10 and 15 years.
So some creative financing then on your part is necessary.
It's creative financing, and again, it doesn't put the financial burden on the local taxpayers, who are, quite frankly, overburdened a little bit right now with that. We're in the process of renovating our auditorium, which is 50 years old, and it's in need of renovation. We're holding a Tricky Tray event, where we're going to hope to bring about 500 to 600 people to this event and raise $50,000 to $60,000. We also have an adopt-a-seat program where people can purchase a seat and have a little brass plaque put on the seat to help offset costs. So that particular project as well, we're trying to finance through private donations and through corporations and things like that.
Through an education foundation?
Well, we're currently working, we don't have a very active education foundation in Hanover, so it's really being run through our PTAs, are spearheading the effort for us, which is another great way for us to, get some things accomplished without having to go to the taxpayers for money.
Okay. And Eileen, you don't have, do you get funding? Your Head Start is a federally funded program.
Head Start is federally funded. We have to make a 20% match to the federal dollars that we receive, and United Way helps us to make that match, and corporations, foundations, private donors, people who come in and volunteer their time, that gets valued in terms of dollars and helps us make the match. Mm-hmm. The issue is that the funding that we receive from the federal government has not kept pace with inflation and with the need for expansion of Head Start in Morris County. There are about 2,000 children, as I said before, that need the Head Start services, and we serve only 245. So it's a drop in the bucket. We need to expand to areas of the county where we don't have a presence, to Parsippany, to the western section of the county around Mount Olive, up in the northern section up past Boonton. And we just don't have the funding to do that. But it's not only Head Start and federal funding. Preschool in general, childcare in general, is having a very, very tough time today, because the amount that the state gives as a subsidy for a low-income child to go to a daycare center is so much lower than it costs the centers, that the more low-income children a center has, the more likely they are to have to close their doors because they can't make ends meet financially.
They're a victim of their own success.
That's right. And the other issue that's going on with the state is, you know, you spoke about Abbott districts before. Abbott districts get funding for all of its children to go to preschool. Out in Morris County, we don't have that because we're not an Abbott district. It would be fairer if the money followed the child, so that if you have 2,000 low-income children in Morris County, ages 0 to 5, that those children would get funded as well as the children who are in Newark or wherever. The money should follow the child.
And yet, Randall, from a larger perspective, in New Jersey, we actually, my perception is, maybe I'm wrong, that we have a pretty strong preschool program in New Jersey.
Well, again, there are strong programs, and that's primarily because you've got an interest when you've got interest on the part of the community and interest on the part of the parents, and then of course the state, you're going to have a good program. The programs are good, but if you have 1,700 children who are without, the 250 who receive it are going to receive good services. What our concern is, again, those students who are left out, again, in some respects because of being victims of their own success, and sometimes just being victims of numbers and also perception. When we talk about affluent districts, we tend to forget that affluent districts do indeed have pockets of poverty. I mean, there are school districts in New Jersey where the per capita is significantly higher than other places, and they have, you know, portions of children receiving public assistance, or portions of families
within one district,
within the same district.
Yeah.
So I mean, you tend to forget about those children, and tend to even forget that they exist from a expenditure perspective. Mm-hmm. And these are the children who socially and sociologically may be in greater need even than some of the students in the Abbott districts, if you will.
So let's look at the bigger picture. If you look at a county like Morris County, where we just heard about the economy, and obviously one of the reasons for the success of Morris County's economy is the education level of its residents. So how do you can see almost in this county almost a direct correlation between education and success and the economy's strength, all of those things. How do you make education a priority in a county like this so that you're reaching everybody and dealing with everyone's potential, hopefully maximizing everyone's potential, when, you know, even in an affluent district, you're faced with severe cash shortages and finance restrictions? You know, you're absolutely right. A study was done, and a 3-year-old child coming from a home where the parents are college educated have vocabularies of 1,000 words. Whereas a child coming from a low-income home only has a vocabulary of 300 words. That's a huge discrepancy. And it's hard to make that gap up. I saw that. That's right. Actually, you need to have quality preschool education so that when the children leave the preschool program, they're ready to enter kindergarten on an even footing with their more affluent peers. And, you know, at one time I taught 2nd grade. And if you have a number of children there that are behind the 8 ball, they hold back the whole class. And I think it would benefit all of Morris County's residents if we could raise that bottom level up so that they can start kindergarten on an even footing. So maybe the tricky tray, the $60,000 from your tricky tray, we could, our system's not set up that way. Right?
No, I think it's a much bigger issue than that. I think we all realize that, and I think Eileen's hit the nail on the head. Certainly, from our perspective, and we're very blessed in Hanover Township, and probably similar to a lot of the communities in Morris County, the vast majority of our children are showing up ready for kindergarten. And in fact, because of the good work that the preschools, the local preschools have done, they've raised the bar for us a little bit, because the children are coming in some instances, certainly much better prepared for school than they were 20 years ago. Right. So that's forced us to take a look at our programs and our curriculum and make sure that we're picking them up at a place that's appropriate so that we can take them to the next level. And that obviously has a ripple effect going all the way up through the system. So that's one of the positives. But Eileen is absolutely correct. Preschool is critical. having the children show up ready to learn and with a certain skill set is certainly vital to our success as a public school system.
So Randall, again, how are we doing in New Jersey with this? Is there a way that we could change the system, or the system needs to be changed?
Well, in part, there are a couple different things. One of the things that actually is happening in New Jersey is that the level of preparation for teachers coming into schools is improving. Places like Fairleigh, Dickinson, and some of the other private institutions that have teacher education programs have raised the minimum standard for continuance in their education programs, exceeding what the state actually mandated. In fact, most of the teacher education programs now require that their students have higher licensing scores and higher graduating GPAs than the state requires, and that's always a good thing. Anytime you can get higher than that. So one of the necessary ingredients is to have teachers that are better prepared, but not just better prepared intellectually, also better prepared culturally, socially, experientially. So if we bring in better teachers and we bring in teachers who are more aware of the disparity between income and preparation with those students, that will help a great deal as well. But what we really need to think about is it's not so much a case that affluent districts ignore. It's a question of allocation of resources.
Right.
And if you have $50,000 that you want to spend, do we spend it on another AP program, which is going to help the very successful, high-achieving, highly motivated students, or do you spend that money someplace else to try to get more students to that level? But then what do you do with them when you get them to that level? So it really does create a rather nasty catch-22, and that's one of the challenges for superintendents to try to figure out. We want our students to be better, but what do we do when they get better? Where do we get the money to support them and in fact encourage them to keep doing better? And that's where it gets to be really tricky.
So how do we do that?
Well, again, a great question that Randall poses. I think we have to reach out, certainly at the high school level, we have to reach out beyond high school to the colleges, to corporations, and the panel that sat here before talked a lot about business and industry in Morris County, and we're very, very fortunate to be blessed to have some great corporations here, BASF, Honeywell, the 3M Corporation. Bayer is moving into Hanover Township, putting their world headquarters there. And from our perspective, we've tried to establish partnerships and relationships with these corporations because they can support us in a lot of ways. They can support us with volunteers that come into the classroom and work with our teachers, work with our children on projects and on clubs and club activities and those kinds of things. And it certainly raises the bar for everybody involved. So, it's a challenge, and it's not, there's no easy answer, there's no light switch we can flip and have the solution that we're looking for, and it's difficult. We're currently in our school district and throughout the state of New Jersey, I think the state is moving in the right direction because they're providing us with information in terms of data analysis that helps us better identify some of those children who perhaps are lagging a little bit behind their peers, so that we can then provide the resources to bring them up to grade and up to speed. Unfortunately, that particular program and that information starts at about 3rd grade, so it's a little bit beyond where Eileen is, and
it's a huge gap in information.
Where we need to target some of those resources. But we're seeing improvement, and we're certainly seeing ability to more quickly identify children who are at risk and provide services specific to those children and to their needs. So that's a good thing.
There are a lot of changes going on in the Department of Education now in New Jersey. And the governor's task force recently released the Education Transformation Task Force report. Is something like this, was that addressed in the report?
It absolutely was addressed. The Education Transformation Task Force was really charged with looking at burdensome statutes and administrative code and regulations that require that we spend a lot of time on compliance activities of reporting out information to the state of New Jersey. And there's been a shift at the Department of Ed level where they really want to be more of a support to the public schools. And to that end, you know, the Commissioner of Education has just restructured the Department of Ed and is looking at these regional achievement centers. And the regional achievement centers are designed to focus their efforts more on school districts where there's a specific need, what they're calling focus schools and priority schools, schools that typically and traditionally have not performed well.
Are most of those Abbott districts?
To some extent, I would say that. So the Department of Ed, I think, realizes that they have limited resources. It's a big state. There's a lot of schools, a lot of school districts, and at least it appears that you know, they don't need to go to a community like Hanover Township per se, or a Mountain Lakes, or a Mendham, where they know the children are performing well, that the school district is providing all of the resources necessary. And they're going to target their efforts more at school districts and communities where the children typically have been underperforming in relation to their peers. So that's a good thing. That's a positive thing. And they have educational specialists who are going to go in and work with the educators in those buildings to help them provide better programs for the children and ultimately raise the bar a little bit.
So certainly from a day-to-day task, I can see where it makes your reporting requirements, as you say, less burdensome.
We hope.
We hope. Does that actually, how does that translate? Do you think it will translate into day-to-day what actually makes a better education for your students?
Well, you know, I think in communities, most of the communities in Morris County, for example, I don't know that the state needs to monitor them quite as closely as they have been. The state has a monitoring program. It used to be every 7 years. Now it's every 3 years. It's QSAC, the Quality Single Accountability Continuum. And they come into your school district and they look at all aspects of your operations, from the educational programs to your operations to your finances, and every 3 years. And there's a lot of indicators you have to meet. And then they certify that you're, in fact, meeting those requirements. And, you know, in Hanover, like many of the other school districts in Morris County, we typically do very, very well. And we're typically labeled as high-achieving school districts, 100% compliance in all areas. And to some extent, that's a waste of resources from the Department of Ed. And as I said earlier, they're really recognizing that, I think, and they're going to put their resources in areas where they could use some additional support.
Well, let me ask Randall, from your perspective, I mean, it sounds like a good thing, and certainly it's very consistent with this administration's philosophy of less regulation is always good. Yeah. But from the perspective of what we actually get in our schools, is it a good thing to have less regulation, do you think, or less monitoring, less oversight from the state?
If you're going to have less regulation, I mean, if we're from a purely administrative perspective, one of the things that you need to have is better diagnostics. And, okay, if a school is performing poorly, why is it performing poorly? You know, most studies indicate that there is a direct economic correlation, that school districts that struggle don't struggle because of a lack of resources. In point of fact, schools that struggle tend to have nice amounts of money to work with. It's a question of the allocation of the resources. It's a question of how do you measure good teaching, good schools? What are the contributing factors that make those schools struggle? And one of the things that Eileen mentioned just a few moments ago was that if you have a child who walks in with approximately 70% fewer vocabulary words at their disposal, why is that happening? Now, if we misdiagnose, what we end up doing is we end up demonizing a school or a school district for something that they inherited, as opposed to allocating those resources to figure out a way to bridge that gap. And if I'm spending more time requiring Eileen to fill out reports, or Scott to do more marshaling together of his administrators in his district, as opposed to trying to address that issue, then that becomes a problem. So it's not so much the regulation. You can have 1,000 regulations if you don't have any diagnoses about what the regulations mean or how to address the problem, or you can have one regulation. You need to figure out a way, not just to figure out what's wrong, but to figure out why it's wrong. And I would submit to you that once we do that, we'll be able to save money reallocate resources and put them into places where they're needed and where they're missing.
You know, when it comes to the economics, the studies have shown that for every dollar invested in quality preschool, the society saves $17. There's an ROI of $17. And I think the importance of this is often overlooked. If we can get these children early on so that they don't enter the public schools so far behind, they won't need special ed, they won't need bilingual ed. We have children that come into our program not knowing a word of English, and by the time they leave, they're totally bilingual. So the children who go to a program such as Head Start end up graduating from high school. We have many success stories.
So you track your kids then once they leave the Head Start program?
We try to. It's a difficult process, but for example, we have one girl who graduated from college with a degree in engineering and got an engineering job and went on to get her master's. We have another story of the mother, when her child came to Head Start, she went back to school. She became a Spanish teacher. Her son is now in college studying medicine, but a research-oriented medicine, and he's doing tremendously. So we've got stories where the whole family benefits from the program.
But as Randall just pointed out, you don't really have any control, obviously. Once you send your kids out, you graduate your kids out into a school that may or may not be an effective school, effective program.
I think part of the key is the involvement of the parents. I know in Head Start, parent involvement is extremely important, and we educate the parents about child development and the importance of working with their children and providing a secure atmosphere for their children. And I think if the public schools went on to continue to involve the parents, that would be very helpful, especially with the low-income parents who do want their children to succeed, but often don't know what they can do to help.
And obviously, this administration is focused on improving teacher quality as well. Yep. Big changes in teacher tenure.
There have been some significant changes there. And just to comment on Eileen's, Eileen's absolutely correct in terms of the parent involvement, because we see it at our level, the more the parents are involved, the better it is for the children. But this segues kind of into what Randall mentioned, and you just brought up the part about the governor's tenure reforms, which really have been very, very positive, and I think it's going to address some of what Randall mentioned a little earlier. You know, every school district now is required to have in place a teacher evaluation system that is research-based and that helps teachers, provides professional development for teachers.
And it's just been enacted.
And so it's just been enacted, and some school districts are piloting it this year. All school districts have to have it in place by the 2013-14 school year, which will be next September. And in Hanover, I know we're in the process of in-servicing and providing professional development to our teachers about the program that we've selected. And we've selected a program, Charlotte Danielson's Enhancing Professional Practice, the Danielson, the domains for teaching. And the state is setting up a tracking system right now where they're going to be able to track each student. Each student has a unique identifier through what's called an NJ SMART program, so they can track the enrollment of the children, they can track their performance in school, especially on state-administered assessments, and they're going to be able to track those children, connect them to the teachers that they have, which is going to help put the pieces of the puzzle together. And between the new teacher evaluation systems, which are providing professional support and development for the teachers, and these tracking systems, we're going to be able to identify which children are doing well in which classrooms connected to which teachers. And for the teachers that perhaps are not performing, where their students are not seeing the same growth that they should see, we'll be able to provide the professional development that perhaps they need, sending them in to mentor with other more experienced teachers or better qualified teachers, et cetera. So it's really actually pretty exciting, and it's a great opportunity for the schools to again raise the bar a little bit, improve instruction from a big picture perspective, and once again provide us, this is the information age, with more information, more data that helps us make good decisions regarding the schools and programs and what we need to do to help the children.
And to play devil's advocate for a minute, you mentioned that you're a former public school teacher.
Yes.
I'm actually a former teacher way back in another life, but I've been a Board of Ed member as well. So, kind of see it from both sides. This is not really embraced warmly by everybody, I think, at this point, right? There's not that teachers are opposed to it, but I think that there's just a lot of questions still about how this is actually going to be administered, and ultimately, how do you get down to defining what makes a, quote, good teacher?
Yeah, there are a lot of questions in that regard, and I think, merit pay comes into play, teacher tenure and retention comes into play. So there are some questions out there and a little concern, and rightfully so, on how this exactly will be administered. We know that in other states, I believe it was California in particular, they were reporting out the names of the teachers in the newspaper and how their children performed, and it really was not welcomed by the school community, and certainly not the Teachers Association. So that's one of the challenges. In the state of New Jersey, they said that's not what they're going to do. They want it to be helpful. They want teachers to improve, where the improvement is needed. So hopefully, if the intent is what we're hearing the intent is, and it's really for professional development purposes and to help all of us do a better job, then that certainly would be a very positive thing.
Randall, right track, wrong track in New Jersey. What do you think?
It's yet to be determined.
The jury's out.
One of the difficulties, and from what we hear from our graduates and from our colleagues that are still out in the K-12 world, one of the big concerns is if you have struggling students, and there have been cases where you've had, let's say, 20 students in grade 4 who are defined as struggling students. What's to stop a building principal from putting 10 of those children in one classroom and having the test results come back where, my God, out of 20 students, you've got 10 who are still defined as struggling. Must be a bad teacher. It must be a bad teacher. Yeah. And that was one of the things that a lot of the teachers who I'm aware of who expressed opposition to it are concerned about. How do you define success? Does a child who comes in at, let's say, on a scale of 100, comes in at 55, and you get them up to 70 or 69, which is still not passing, if you've had a 14-point increase versus bringing a kid in at an 80 who graduates out with an 82, you get credit for the kid being at the 82, but you get a deficit for the kid going from 55 to 69. How do you index that out? So some of those little complications muddy the waters, and if that can be addressed, and if we start measuring rate of progress as opposed to just raw data, and that's the thing that Scott was talking about. If we've got more information, we have more data, we've got fewer regulations, we need more diagnostic tools. If we have better ways of diagnosing exactly what we're looking at, exactly how we measure rates of progress, then it will be a very good move, and we will be, if there's something better than being on the right track, the more right track, the most right track.
The righter track.
And quite frankly, that's what all of us, or presumably, are seeking. But I know that those of us who are in the training of teachers and those of us who are on the ground in K-12 or pre-K to 12, that's what we're all seeking. So.
Yeah, and just to that point, the state and the Department of Ed, I think, have recognized that that's one of the challenges. And one of the models that they're looking at, and it appears to be the model that they will be working from, is called a student growth percentile method, where they will do exactly what Randall is suggesting, which is they're going to have a baseline for a child from year to year, and then they're going to measure the growth of that particular child. So for a teacher who has concerns about perhaps having too many children in their classroom who have learning disabilities, or perhaps are a little bit behind their peers, provided that teacher can show growth from that baseline for that child and show some growth, they will be given credit for that, and it will not be held against them that those children are not achieving at 80% or 90%, and perhaps are only achieving at 60 or 70% proficiency.
So
that's a great model.
And for the teachers who embrace challenges like that, if this comes to full fruition, there are certain teachers who flourish working with struggling students. You know, so when they are brought into the game, if you will, told, look, we've got a kid who's at 65. Can you get him to 75? There are teachers who actually want to do that.
Which is the job of the building principal.
You know,
of the
Well, I was
superintendent,
just going to
right?
say that, and that's a great point, and it's something certainly in Hanover that we have done. When we look at staffing every year, we've made it a point to take some of what we consider some of our best teachers, some of our best technicians, and place them in teaching basic skills and coordinated services, because they've demonstrated over the years that they've been able to do those kinds of things, and that's all part of the administrative end of running a school district, and we've had some pretty good success with that, and I would argue that some of my best teachers are teaching either special ed or basic skills or some of those types of programs, and it's by design, because we know those children have the greatest needs, and we want to give them the best opportunity for growth.
And we're almost out of time, so I'm going to ask each of you to do a closing comment. But let me just ask each of you, as we asked in the last panel, what one thing would you like to see happen to improve the economy in Morris County, to bring it back to where we are and localize it? What do you think would have the greatest impact for your programs? What one thing would you like to see happen to really move you forward, specifically what you're working on?
I think, as I said before, for Head Start, it's more funding to serve more children, so that every child who is in need can receive the services. And in terms of child care and preschool in general, it's to have the money follow the child, so that when there is state funding, that every child who's eligible for it gets it, no matter whether they live in Madison or in Matawan or in Newark.
Randall?
One of the things I think that would go a long way in terms of improving the economic outlook in our county would be an environment that encourages even more the development of teachers. We actually have 3 teacher education programs in Madison, you know,
right,
with our 3 colleges here. And if there is more of an embrace, that's not to say that it's not embraced, let's say hug a little harder, if you will, for the brand new teachers coming in, and for the development of partnerships inside the school districts to encourage those teachers who are already in the schools, so that they can continue to do the good work that they already do.
Teacher mentoring and teacher development.
Teacher mentoring, teacher development, and also opportunities for those pre-service educators, those students who are in education programs, to perhaps get out into programs such as Head Start programs and other such programs that would also, and quite frankly, help them to stretch their dollars. So there are a lot of different things, and I'm just hoping that we would just have embrace a greater commitment.
And more collaboration.
More collaboration and greater embrace of the already strong commitment.
And Scott, and I should have pointed out earlier that not only are you superintendent in Hanover, you're also the chairman of the Superintendent's Roundtable.
Yeah, I'm president of the Morris County Association of School Administrators, yes. You know, from my perspective, I would tend to agree with both Eileen and Randall. I think, you know, certainly funding is always a challenge, and especially because it places an undue burden, I guess, on the suburban areas. As you know, the funding, for example, in Hanover, and I don't want to be misquoted here, but I think it's about $5 a day per child, and the rest of the funding comes from the local taxpayers, and that's a challenge. Professional development is key. Providing teachers and administrators and everyone who works with the children with as much support as possible, I think is important, and I think the state is moving in the right direction in that regard, and I also think that the state providing us with as much data and information and useful information that helps us target the specific needs that the children have is also critical to our success going forward.
And you think we're headed in the right direction?
I think we're headed in the right direction. I think the jury's out a little bit, but I think I like what I see. I like some of the trends that I see, and I'm optimistic. I'm an optimist. Otherwise, I wouldn't be an educator.
And on that optimistic note, we'll end the discussion. Thank you all so much for participating in the discussion this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.